It's not just you. Everyone hates Starbucks now. People, what up? What's good? It's your boy TwoCentz, man. We got an interesting topic from Fad's YouTube channel talking about Starbucks. You guys, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I've never been a coffee drinker. Like, I've had coffee a few times. It just never, did whatever it does to people's brains to my brain, to the point where I feel like I need it every single morning. I've probably been to Starbucks a total of like 4 times in life. Clearly, I'm not the target audience. Wife beater and dreadlocks. Y'all don't really see that in Starbucks. Well, let's check out, man, why they hating on the brand, man. Let's check it out.
Starbucks is struggling. Their profits are down by a whopping 50% following 6 straight.
50%. How old is this video, y'all? 2 days old, bro. Y'all, that's nuts. You lose. That's wow. I don't want to stay stuck on this for so long, but profit fell by 50% in a quarter. So what's a quarter? 3 months? 3 months into the year, they lost half of their revenue, bro. What would you do?
Quarters of losses, and a declining image has left one of America's most recognizable brands in a bit of a bind. They just recently announced that they'd be closing a swathe of stores, as well as laying off 900 corporate staff members. This is after laying off another 1,100 corporate staff just in February. Customers are reporting high prices, long queues, and substandard product time and time again. And even staples like their pumpkin spice latte has lost its shine and left room for competitors to take their shot at the king, with great success in some cases. But it wasn't always like this. At one point, Starbucks was America's sweetheart. Their come up was a real hero's journey, the story of one man who turned a local coffee roaster into a global sensation, left, then came back and did it all again. But since those days, clearly quite a lot has changed, largely for the worst. And it's left Starbucks in a situation where it's fighting desperately.
And you know what, you guys? Obviously, we're watching this video about Starbucks, man. But I feel like we keep hearing about these fast food. We did some videos on McDonald's. We keep hearing about these fast food restaurants, I guess coffee shops, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call them, are like doing really bad as of late. I actually feel like that's a good thing. I mean, obviously it's not for the people, who work there and, who might be employed and that's how they get by. But as far as like the overall health of the population, it's good that we're not, getting coffee every morning from Starbucks and consuming all these sugars and going to McDonald's and eating all these empty calories as much as we used to, man. So, but let's keep watching.
Doesn't seem to have quite as many customers in its corner as it once did. So sit back and let's learn why Starbucks fell off. People tend to have quite strong opinions about coffee, especially about other people's coffee choices. Some people will look at you like you just admitted to drinking horse urine if you tell them that you like Starbucks, but others might need their double shot vanilla hazelnut methamphetamine venti frappuccino literally every morning. But no matter which side,
right, y'all be putting like 20 names for one order of coffee, man. Y'all be doing the most, bro.
Of the aisle you end up landing on, it's pretty impossible to deny the impact that Starbucks has had on all of our lives. It began in 1971 when 3 partners, Jerry, Gordon, and Zev, opened a little store in Seattle's Pike Place Market. They had no intention of actually making coffee. Instead, they sold like roasted coffee beans, teas, and spices. And they did fine, really. They became a staple of the local community, a place where you could go get your beans, come home, and then brew them for the family. But things changed in 1982 with the arrival of one man, and a name that you might want to remember, Howard Schultz.
Howard Schultz. He looked like he knows how to make money. Just look at him. That's a money making man right there, y'all.
In 1982, Howard Schultz joined as head of marketing.
Oh, yeah.
And on one of his very first business trips, he visited Milan, Italy, and experienced something that would completely change his business back home: Italian coffee bars. So at this time in the 80s, coffee culture in America largely revolved around drip coffee, served in a big mug or a styrofoam cup, often with free refills in like a diner or an office. You would drink coffee for the caffeine, not for fun. In Italy, on the other hand, the story was a little bit different.
It was a different
Over
vibe,
there, coffee was a social ritual. It was something that you would drink at a bar with friends and as a communal activity as much as for the caffeine. It was something that would be woven into your day-to-day life and not neck down in order to get a jolt of energy.
Right.
The drinks had standardized names. each of which was designed for a different type of gathering, and they were priced pretty fairly so that everyone could take part. A long shot from the way it was done in America. And Schultz saw this idea, tried to bring it to America.
Yeah, Schultz said, he said, I need that. He said, I need that. We got money to make. We got dollars, right? We got revenue to generate.
To create this real third place where people could grab a drink with their friends, hang out, and make coffee part of their social life instead of just fuel. But it was actually a controversial idea, so controversial in fact that none of the original Starbucks bosses wanted to accept it. And so Schultz was forced to leave, start his own cafe chain, implement these ideas, and did it to such great success that he ended up coming back and buying out Starbucks from its original owners just 4 years later. And this is where the
How do you think they feel, bro? Or they feel? I don't know if they're still alive. I'd be sick.
Starbucks that you and I would recognize today.
Imagine missing out on an opportunity as huge as that. We've all, passed up on a good opportunity in one way or another, but $1 billion idea like Starbucks, and you didn't want to tap in with what's his name, Schultz, Mr. Schultz, Howard Schultz. I would be salty for the rest of my life, bro.
Began. Starbucks became this place where everything was designed for familiarity and comfort. They chose round tables because they were less isolating and more inviting. They encouraged customers to take their time with their drinks, and every detail was carefully curated to make their cafes into community spots to great success. They went from 6 stores in 1987 to 3,500 stores in the year 2000
quickly,
when
bro.
Schultz finally decided to step down as CEO. And when the 2008 recession finally hit and Starbucks was struggling once again, Howard Schultz came out of retirement like Pele or something to get them back to their roots of being this third place where anyone could hang out and have an affordable...
Man, he said, y'all forgot how to make money. I'll come back. Y'all don't know. I'll do it. Man, I'm rocking with Howard Schultz, bro. He said, y'all don't know how to make money. Fine.
Social communal
Let me
drink
take
with
over.
a friend. He shut down all of the Starbucks in America for a day to retrain the baristas on how to improve their espresso quality. They brought in new machines, and the company experimented with new menu items and leaned heavily into becoming an ethical community spot. And it seemed like it worked. A couple of years post-recession, they were profitable again. No one could really seem to beat them, and they were everywhere. But no good thing lasts forever, unfortunately. Right. The pandemic set in motion the real shift for Starbucks. The concept of hanging out indoors with others, which Starbucks had built its entire model on, was immediately cancelled, right? Coffee culture went back almost overnight to being incredibly individual. And the big winners from this were the drive-through coffee shops like Dutch Bros and Seven Brew, which grew steadily throughout this period. Starbucks did try to ride the wave by pushing their apps and their collection-only stores, but they were already in too deep with the old model and stuck between two worlds. Post-pandemic, almost 60% of coffee is actually ordered at drive-thrus in the US, and it's growing year on year. The pandemic was really this huge turning point for how people chose to spend their time, and sitting in a Starbucks was one of the first things to be cut from the budget. And despite the fact that their marketing materials would have you believe that they really want to be a community location where people can hang out, the reality is that Starbucks is a $90 billion corporation, and they've done all of the same things that you'd expect from any other company that size. Over the last decade, they've really aggressively cut costs, they've deprioritized the look and feel of their stores, and they've focused on squeezing more profits out of their once...
The same strategy that is causing every other chain to fail. Why? Bring back the community look. Bring the vibe back. Do like... I'm no business expert, right? But if something allowed me to succeed, why would I stray from doing what allowed me to succeed? What allowed me to generate billions of dollars? What people know me for, Hey man.
Extremely loyal clientele. Having a place where people buy one drink and then sit around for an hour is a really bad way to make money every quarter. And so they started making more and more stores have less and less seating. Their staffing priorities focused more on meeting drive-through demand.
But at the same time, yeah, sure, like, I'm kind of answering my own question. Like, the pandemic changed things. I feel like we're just now getting to the point where, people are outside and there's crowded areas again, bro. Like 5 years later, so I mean, you kind of got to change with the times, but at the same time, it's like, at least from the store design perspective, um, and sure, like it's about squeezing as much profit as possible, but like that's a part of the customer's experience, bro. Like y'all remember the McDonald's play place? Maybe you don't. Maybe you're too young for that. The Burger King hats and all that. Like even outside of food service, bro. Like going to GameStop as a kid, and they had like the cardboard booths and all that. Like all these stores, like fast food or not, like everything is just losing personality, even all the way down to the logos, bro. I don't understand that.
At the expense of in-store customers because they generate more dollars per hour. And they jacked up the prices to the absolute maximum that they felt like they could get away with. But you can only squeeze people so far before they break. Since the pandemic, inflation has been pretty intense, and it's seriously hit the food and drinks world. But also by the time the pandemic had rolled around, the coffee business was already bigger than ever, and there were more and more options for everyone at any price point. Starbucks had, to some degree, been able to justify its prices through all of the auxiliary perks that you would get along with your coffee. You get to sit in a nice location, you wouldn't feel rushed or pressured to leave, and you had things like free Wi-Fi at your disposal so you could even work there. But their hand was kind of forced, and instead of doubling down on the third place model, they tried to align themselves more with the rapid delivery model. More and more coffee is consumed on the go, and the interior of a Starbucks has progressively shifted to meet the demand from those customers. And the $8 Starbucks cup of coffee doesn't quite feel as good when you order it from a drive-thru and drink it in your car as it does when you sit inside a nice environment with a friend. The more price-conscious consumer can make coffee at home now or trade down to an even cheaper coffee place like McDonald's, while the more affluent clientele has access to a bunch of like artisanal spots, to specialty coffee, and to independent businesses that have way more insight and time to discuss the details and intricacies of their products. Independent cafes are now so much more trendy and are seen as a more socially acceptable choice. While Starbucks is better known for employee union busting, boycotts, and being overall bad value for money. I think Starbucks held on to this idea that they were a real third place when they haven't really been that for years. At their core, they're a fast food dessert shop that people go to for convenience and consistency. It's more like McDonald's than it is a local community diner. But McDonald's at least has the Big Mac. For Starbucks, far too much of their menu was replaceable, and their niche, unique offerings clearly haven't been enough to keep people hooked, especially not the prices that they're trying to sell them at. And their CEO has recognized this today. They've vowed to minimize price hikes going forward and focus their new strategy on bringing back the cozy interiors. But I think it might be too little too late. Because while Starbucks has been doing layoff after layoff, closing stores and forcing AI into the stores that are still around, the competition has been innovating, listening to customers, and actually just like giving people what they're screaming out for. And this might not actually be that obvious if you live in the US, where you can still find Starbucks that are 200 meters away from each other, but it's a lot more obvious in other parts of the world, especially in China, where the story of Starbucks looks a lot more dire. When you think of coffee culture, China might not be the first country that jumps to mind, but maybe it should. China has taken some 800 million people out of poverty since the 80s, and in the process, they've created this whole new consumer class. This group of people who are looking for nice little treats to spend their money on. And Starbucks has been, for a while, desperate to fill that role. They opened their first Chinese branch in 1999 and used their first...
That just looks fire, bro. That just looks fire, The cult, like integrating the brand with like the culture of China, man. Like how can we, or not how can we, but like how like why don't Jesus, why don't like stores and brands do that, or like restaurants and coffee shops do that here in America? I mean, what can you really do? Like I don't know. Put Uncle Sam up there, a bald eagle, and an American flag, maybe. but I don't know, man. Like even this, He's gonna explain the situation in China, whether it's good or bad. But like, this is just so much cooler than any Starbucks I've ever seen. And I live in Chicago, and we have that like that super Starbucks downtown.
Mover advantage to completely take over. At their peak, they had over 40% of the coffee market, but since then they've had a serious fall off. In less than a decade, they've gone from holding over 40% of the Chinese coffee market to under 15%. Starbucks had been gambling on this idea that as China became wealthier, consumers there would behave increasingly like Americans. Basically, they'd drink Starbucks and eat McDonald's. And in a way, the Chinese did begin to behave more like the Americans, just not in the way that Starbucks expected. Because while China has this large new middle class, that group has been subject to many of the same pressures that you see in the rest of the world. Chinese disposable income levels have been pretty stagnant, and they've also grown tired of the increasing inflation that a place like Starbucks has been imposing onto its customers. But also, don't know if you've noticed, China has been on a bit of an industrial tear lately. The technology is getting pretty wild over there, and the coffee industry has been no exception. The main competitor in China, Luckin, has capitalized on the dissatisfaction by offering cheap, really customizable drinks. They focus on mobile-only orders and emphasize speed and convenience at like half of the price of a Starbucks. They often have literally zero seating inside of the stores. And it's worked really well for them. It's worked so well that even though Starbucks had a 20-year head start, Luckin now has more stores in China than Starbucks does. And whereas Starbucks is closing stores in the US, Luckin is actually expanding into the US, having opened a couple of stores in New York City already. In fact, Starbucks was so terrified of this competition that at the opening of the very first Luckin store, Starbucks bought ad space on an empty lot across the street and plastered it with advertising to remind people that they still exist. But meanwhile, Luckin was offering $1.99 coffees for new customers. And I think one of those strategies is a lot more appealing than the other. Starbucks is ultimately like a fast food business, right? It's not a third place for most of us. And as such, they've been susceptible to many of the same risks that other fast food places are. The McDonald's CEO recently said in...
By the way, you guys, he's saying third place. Like, if you never heard that term, third place or third space is kind of like a, like a library, a park, somewhere that you go to hang out basically or meet people.
Interview that
what we see with middle and lower income consumers is actually a different story. It's that consumers under a lot of pressure in our industry. Traffic for lower income consumers is down double digits. And it's because people are either choosing to skip a meal or they're choosing to just eat at home.
Whereas in the past, consumers would usually trade down from sit-in restaurants to more affordable options when the economy got rough. They're not doing that anymore. Prices are so high, even at historically more affordable locations, that trading down to McDonald's is not really a feasible option anymore. And a similar story is playing out with Starbucks. They're not really fancy enough to attract the clientele that would go to an independent coffee shop, but they're not affordable enough to satisfy the people who are looking for a quick way to drink some caffeine. And all of this has been compounded by the fact that society has fundamentally changed quite a lot in the last 5 years. The idea of sitting down for an hour to sip a coffee with friends, like Howard Schultz once dreamed, is basically gone. Individualism has really won, and people's consumption choices are reflecting that. And so the fact that the CEO is trying to focus on bringing back the cozy new interiors and making Starbucks feel homey, I think might be too little too late. They seem to be convinced that they'll be able to go back to their former glory just by using AI and doing some renovations. But I'm not sure how much people actually even want that today, least of all from their local Starbucks. And amongst all of this climate, there are so many more headwinds for them. Coffee inflation is 10 times the average inflation for food, thanks to tariffs and really bad harvests. And customers have more high quality alternatives than ever before. But I guess we'll see. For now, I'm going to stick to my little mocha pot and occasional outing to a nicer cafe.
Man, shout outs to fads, man. So basically inflation, times have changed, and we got competitors. That's tough. We'll see if Starbucks recovers or not. I mean, I hope you don't work there, because I say it don't involve any of us, but maybe it involves you. So maybe go work at you know what I'm saying? What is it called? Y'all Luckin. As always, your boy TwoCentz. Say it with me. TCZ. We out.